All right, good evening, everybody. We'll get started shortly. Please make sure that your audio is muted. Feel free to use the chat function to ask any questions that you might already have. Our staff will be monitoring the chat and they're going to pass questions on to our speakers when we reach the Q&A portion of the meeting. Before we go into breakout rooms by different languages, let's go ahead and spend the first few minutes all together.
大家好，今次嘅會議咧就即將開始啦。請各位確保嘅電子設備已經靜音。喺個會議過程之中，如果有乜嘢任何嘅疑問咧，歡迎你哋隨時用個聊天 chat 個功能下就進行提問嘅。咁我哋工作人員咧就會關注你嘅聊天室，同埋將會議嘅最後咧就會有問答嘅環節嘅，所以你哋可以將啲問題保留最後問下。Next.
Buenas tardes a todos. Comenzaremos en breve. Por favor, primero asegúrense de tener sus micrófonos apagados y recuerden que pueden hacer preguntas en la sección del chat con la función del Zoom del chat. Nuestro equipo estará atento en todo momento a los mensajes y les pasará las preguntas a los oradores cuando lleguemos al momento destinado para preguntas. Antes de entrar a estas salas de interpretación, vamos a pasar primero unos momentos aquí juntos, todos en esta sala principal.
Thank you so much, George and Esteban, for the interpretation in Cantonese and Spanish. So while everybody's joining, let's do a quick get to know you icebreaker. If you're comfortable participating, our question for today is, how are you feeling coming into this meeting? Please go ahead and type your answer into the chat. Thank you.
各位，現在大家都差唔多就位啦。我哋開始嘅時候有一個破冰嘅環節咧，即係大家熟絡啲，互相認識下大家，或者簡單介紹下自己。你哋願意參加呢個環節嘅話咧，可以用下邊嘅 chat room 嘅 chat 嘅功能，即係聊天嘅功能咧，講下你參與呢個會議有咩感受，或者你帶住咩嘅心情嚟到今日嘅會議。請你哋而家可以將你答案輸入去呢個聊天室。
Mientras esperamos que se unan los demás, vamos a hacer una breve actividad para conocernos un poco más el grupo. Y si desea participar, nuestra pregunta para el día de hoy es ¿cómo se siente en este momento al llegar a esta junta, a ingresar a este espacio? Por favor, escriban sus respuestas en el chat.
Looks like we have some answers rolling in. I see enjoying the music that we had going on, excited, curious, hungry. Also curious if the music at the beginning has any hints about the planning. You'll find out. And hoping that the plans are ambitious enough that we won't be regretting them in 20 years when much more capacity will be needed. And interested. Oh, hungry. Sorry, I missed that one. That's important too. It is dinner time. All right, many thanks to everybody who shared. Really appreciate it. If you're concerned or frustrated or apprehensive, thank you for sharing both positive or holding those feelings with you. Thank you for whatever you're bringing into this meeting. Our team hear you, and however you're feeling is welcome in this space.
Lo comparto en español. Gracias por los que han compartido sus sentimientos. Tal vez algunos no los han compartido. Nuestro equipo entiende si tienen inquietudes, dudas, y preguntas, obviamente. Y ustedes queremos que sepan que son bienvenidos en este espacio, tal como sea que se sientan llegando.
好多謝各位嘅提議輸入。頭先主 主講嘅嘉賓咧已經講咗，收到好多你哋嘅信息，你哋都提咗好多你哋嘅感受。咁當然我哋未有中文嘅翻譯喺度睇你嗰個，但係有好多朋友已經表達咗意見，譬如話肚餓啊，今日而家就嚟食飯啦，咁啊主講單位就話好多謝你哋嘅意見，知道你哋今日嘅心情啦。
So thanks everybody. We have Spanish and Cantonese interpretation available.
好多謝各位嘅意見。今日咧，我哋想講有西班牙語同埋廣東話嘅口譯服務嘅。
Contamos claramente con servicio de interpretación al español.
So if you would like interpretation in Spanish, please use the raise hand or chat feature in Zoom, or simply raise your hand if you're on camera now. If you dialed in, please press *9 to be placed into the Spanish breakout room. The Spanish breakout room will have the slide deck in Spanish. We may have momentarily lost Esteban. I'll read the instructions for the Chinese room and then we'll come back to Spanish. If you'd like interpretation in Cantonese, please use the raise hand or chat feature in Zoom, or raise your hand if you are on camera. The Cantonese breakout room will have the slide deck in Chinese. Go ahead, George. Apologies for the technical difficulties, everyone. Please be patient for just a moment. Go ahead, Dulce. Thank you, Dulce, for raising your hand to be placed in the Spanish room. I think we're okay. I think we're now in our breakout rooms. Thank you for your patience. All right, then we will carry on. Thanks, everybody. All right, so next slide, please. Thank you, Jen. So welcome again, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anna Harvey. We're here this evening to share some background on various transportation projects as they relate to the Southeast Rail Station Study, and to provide some details on that work, which is exploring the future of Caltrain stations in Southeastern San Francisco. This is the first of 2 rounds of public workshops we'll be holding about this work. The first round consists of tonight's meeting and an identical workshop that will take place on Saturday, October 9th from 12 p.m. until around 1:30. The second round will also consist of a Thursday evening, November 4th, and a Saturday, November 6th at midday. The November meetings will dive deeper into specific concepts for potential station locations. Thanks again for being here, and we hope you can also join us at one of those meetings in November.
Anna, just quickly, sorry to jump in. We may still have George in this room to quickly make the announcement in Cantonese and then have him go back to the appropriate breakout room.
Thank you, Jesse. Go ahead, George.
Thank you, Jesse. 我係你哋今日嘅翻譯。我嚟咧宣佈一下，如果你需要翻譯服務嘅話咧，我哋今日有中文嘅簡介，就喺一個叫做小組會議室裏邊嘅。如果你有需要入去中文嘅小組會議室咧，請你哋用呢一個舉手 raise hand 嘅功能喺下邊，或者係直接喺個電話按9號收聽廣東話嘅翻譯。多謝各位。而家我哋會入去我哋嘅 Breakout Room， 即係我哋翻譯會議室裏邊。Can you please put me back in? Oh, I don't know how to get back to the breakout room.
Let me see. All right. Thanks, everybody, so much for your patience. Obviously, we'd very much like to be holding this meeting in person. It would make things like translation much simpler and easier. But after the last year and a half of pandemic living, a lot of us have had to become used to meeting virtually. So with that said, we'll do our best to make our time today together useful and informative. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that the project area that we're discussing is located on the unceded ancestral land and shorelines homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. Further, we understand that polluting and disruptive city infrastructure, both including the train tracks and freeways most relevant to this study, as well as treatment plants and heavy industry, have disproportionately affected Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities over the last century or more of development in our city. We encourage you to keep these things in mind during our presentation and as we move forward with planning. So next slide, thank you. So the presenters today include myself. I'm Anna Harvey with the San Francisco Planning Department and the project manager of the Southeast Rail Station Study. Jesse Kaler, the Rail Program Manager with the San Francisco County Transportation Authority, and Anthony Simmons, Director of System-Wide Stations and Capital Planning with Caltrain. We're also joined and supported by many other city and Caltrain staff and consultants who have contributed to this work. There will be contact information for everyone and the project at the end of the presentation in case you want to follow up with any of us. Our agenda today is fairly straightforward. We'd like to provide an orientation to the various projects on and around the Caltrain rail corridor in southeastern San Francisco, and to use that background to explain how we're choosing potential locations for future stations on that rail corridor. We'll answer a series of questions to break the information into manageable chunks. Our goal is to help you understand the different plans for rail in San Francisco and to prepare you to give us your input on the future of Caltrain stations in Southeast San Francisco. So what are we here to talk about today? San Francisco, in partnership with Caltrain, is planning for the future of the railroad corridor in the city. There are lots of moving pieces under consideration, including building a new train tunnel under Pennsylvania Avenue, rebuilding or replacing the 22nd Street station, and constructing a new station in the Bayview. These decisions build on improvement projects already underway, including electrification of the Caltrain corridor all the way down to San Jose, and a tunnel to extend Caltrain to the Salesforce Transit Center in the heart of downtown. With that, I'll hand this over to Caltrain to speak about the past, present, and future of their system. Anthony.
Thanks, Anna, and thank you everybody for joining. My name is Anthony Simmons. I'm Director of System-Wide Stations and Capital Planning for Caltrain. And I'm just going to briefly talk through where Caltrain is, where it's been, and where it's headed. The map in front of you shows that Caltrain, as it sits, is a 77-mile corridor that extends from San Francisco, so at the 4th and King station, all the way down to San Jose and beyond. And that first 51 miles actually from San Francisco down to San Jose is owned by Caltrain, and the balance down to Gilroy in southern Santa Clara County is owned by the Union Pacific Railroad. Next slide, please. Looking further and more closely in the area that I think everyone will be a little bit more intimate with, within San Francisco, the San Francisco segment runs along the 101 freeway through the Bayview. It parallels the 280 freeway through the Dogpatch, Potrero Hill, and Mission Bay, and terminates at the 4th and King station in Soma. In addition to 4th and King, San Francisco has two other existing stations, one at 22nd Street in between Potrero Hill and the Dogpatch, and a second station called Bayshore that's right on the city boundary with Brisbane. Next slide, please. Caltrain currently shares these tracks with some freight trains throughout the corridor. So I mentioned before that part of the corridor in the very southern end is owned by Union Pacific Railroad. Union Pacific also travels further up the Caltrain corridor as far north as parts of San Francisco, where they make deliveries and receive shipments at the Port of San Francisco. Additionally, in the future, Caltrain tracks will be used for the California high-speed rail system as it makes its way up to San Francisco. Next slide, please. Of course, one of the key parts of Caltrain is its history, which makes it a very unique part of the Bay Area fabric. Caltrain has been, or the Caltrain corridor has been in use for passenger rail service for more than 150 years. In the 1880s, before train service, it actually took about 3 days to get from San Francisco to San Jose. But when passenger service began after that time, that shortened that travel between San Francisco and San Jose to a matter of hours. The system that we know today actually had its start as Caltrain in 1992, when San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties took over the operation. I'm sorry, next slide. The system we know today took over the train from the state of California, and now Caltrain currently operates a regional rail service at about 104 trains per day, which interestingly is the highest frequency or the highest number of trains that Caltrain has ever run, with 31 stations. Previously, Caltrain had a station in the Bayview neighborhood at Paul Avenue, but the station was closed in 2005 due to low ridership. Next slide, please. So one of the major things that people can notice up and down the Caltrain corridor is quite a bit of construction that changes the face of what Caltrain means or has meant in the past, and that starts to point to Caltrain's future. Caltrain is currently in the middle of an electrification program, or the Peninsula Corridor Electrification Project, where it's replacing its old diesel trains with electric train sets. This also includes the installation of electric infrastructure and wires and poles along the tracks. Next slide, please. Caltrain electrification will improve Caltrain's system performance and curtail long-term environmental impacts by reducing noise, improving regional air quality, particularly right close to the tracks, and lowering greenhouse gas emissions. This will create a cleaner and greener and quieter and more efficient system. And our goal now is to have the whole system complete, up and running and ready for passengers in 2024. Next slide, please. This is just an example of some of the works that are happening. Some of it may have been noticed, others may not. Some of it happens at different times of day. Sometimes it happens when everyone is hopefully getting a little bit of rest. The top shows a bit of some installation or some retrofitting to deal with the electrification process in some of the tunnels in San Francisco, just stringing the poles and wires and getting that infrastructure in place to play host to the electric train sets that will come into the future. Next slide, please. Looking further into that future, so we've got some electric train sets running. It's a quieter corridor that's got better service, that is much more enjoyable to the public as we continue to rebuild from the impacts of the pandemic. The corridor continues to be a dynamic one that is in the process of several major studies and changes that will improve the system and allow for access to be improved and increased. So I mentioned before about the 104 trains per day. That's an effort for Caltrain already to start that journey to improve access for more people onto the system. Caltrain is also currently nearing the end of a feasibility study that's investigating potential station access and accessibility improvements within the footprint of the existing 22nd Street station. Also, a couple of years back in 2019, the Caltrain board adopted the 2040 long-range service vision. Even in these uncertain times, it's still the long-term roadmap for Caltrain to expand and meet the future mobility needs of the region. This vision includes the planned extension of the Salesforce Transit Center in downtown San Francisco and higher frequency electrified service that will allow ridership to grow to approximately 180,000 daily riders. So we would increase trains being about 8 trains per hour per direction. This would be the equivalent of eliminating 825,000 car trips and 110 metric tons of carbon emissions every day. And we'll put an estimated 5.5 lanes of commuter traffic onto Caltrain instead of the region's highways. So that gives a little bit of a picture of where Caltrain is headed. There are some more signature projects that are happening in San Francisco. And for a bit of more information on that, I'll turn it over to Jesse Kaler with SFCTA.
Great, thanks, Anthony. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jesse Kaler. I'm the Rail Program Manager at the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. We are your long-range transportation planning and funding agency here in the city and county. We all know that in the future, the population of San Francisco and the Bay Area is going to continue to increase, and that the number of jobs and people commuting to those jobs will also increase. Our transportation infrastructure needs to rise to the challenge of moving more people, preferably in fewer cars and with less greenhouse gas emissions. I'll speak about two major projects affecting the Caltrain corridor in San Francisco. The first is the Downtown Rail Extension, or DTX, which will extend Caltrain from its current terminal at 4th and King to the Salesforce Transit Center via a new tunnel. The project will construct a new station at 4th and Townsend Streets and bring rail service to the underground train station that was built as part of the construction of Salesforce Transit Center, shown on the slide here. The DTX project is environmentally cleared and is currently in the design phase. Construction is anticipated to begin in approximately 2025 and to last about 6 to 8 years. The DTX project is being designed to connect to a future project to continue the tunneled rail alignment south from 4th and Townsend along 7th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. Next slide. This future project, known as the Pennsylvania Avenue Extension, or PAX, will eliminate conflicts between trains and street users at 16th Street, a major east-west travel corridor that serves Mission Bay, as well as Mission Bay Drive. This route was endorsed by the Mayor's Office and the Board of Supervisors in 2018, following completion of the San Francisco Planning Department's Rail Yard Alignment and Benefits Study. Next slide. The PAX project is still in concept development, and funding and construction will be determined in later phases of work. What we know so far is that the Downtown Extension Tunnel would be extended south under 7th Street and further under Pennsylvania Avenue. This would successfully separate the tracks from the street network, allowing us to reconnect neighborhoods and improve safety for pedestrians, cyclists, buses, and cars. Traffic would no longer need to wait while trains cross. We don't yet know exactly how far south the PAX tunnel will extend. It may require the redesign or relocation of the existing 22nd Street station. This potential impact has motivated the current Southeast Rail Station study, and I'll turn it over to Anna to cover that topic.
Thank you, Jesse. So what are we studying in the Southeast Rail Station study? So this work is looking at the future of stations in the southeastern part of the city. It considers options for 2 potential stations, one at or in place of 22nd Street, and a new station to restore regional rail service to the Bayview that was lost when Paul Avenue Station closed in 2005. So why are we considering changing 22nd Street Station? Moving the tracks to fit inside the new Pennsylvania Avenue Extension Tunnel may require construction of a new station to replace 22nd Street. And the best place for it might not be right at 22nd Street, but somewhere else in the stretch between 16th Street and Cesar Chavez. So are we considering having 2 stations between 4th and King and Bayshore? The city is also looking to restore service to the Bayview. As early as 2005, the community identified Oakdale Avenue as a potential replacement for Paul Avenue Station. The desire for a station was most recently confirmed by the local community in the Bayview Community-Based Transportation Plan completed in 2020. If and when these new stations are built, they have to work together. This is why we're studying them together. So why might we be looking at options for a Bayview station other than at Oakdale? We know that the community has made it clear in the past that Oakdale Avenue is their choice for a new station to replace Paul Avenue. However, some time has passed and we know that the area has changed over that time. And we wanted to check back and confirm that Oakdale remains the most favorable option. So where could the stations go? We've done engineering studies to identify all possible station options. The study considered track geometry. You can't build a station on a curve, for example, physical barriers like hills and creeks, and the distance between potential stations. The study revealed 6 possible locations in the project area, 3 options for 22nd Street and 3 options for a Bayview station. These locations are shown here based on the nearest cross street. For 22nd Street, The station could either stay approximately where it is, either on the current track alignment or inside the Pennsylvania Avenue Extension Tunnel, but it might be rebuilt or shifted into that tunnel, or it could be shifted north to around Mariposa Street or south to Cesar Chavez. The option at Mariposa would be deep in the PAX tunnel. The option at Cesar Chavez would be on the surface near where that tunnel might end. For a Bayview station, we've mentioned that the long-standing alternative has been at Oakdale Avenue. There are additional options that we'd like to consider and ask for feedback on at Evans and Williams. So how do I get involved? Now that we all understand the basics of the project to plan new Southeast Rail stations, please mark your calendars to join us at our next round of meetings, where we'll go more in depth on these station options and get your feedback. We hope you, your friends, families, and neighbors will join us either Thursday, November 4th at 6 p.m. or Saturday, November 6th at 12 p.m. to continue this conversation. Both of those meetings will cover the same in-depth information, and they will have both Chinese and Spanish interpretation available. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, or concerns for the project team, please visit www.sfplanning.org/SERSS or email cpc.serss@sfgov.org.